up here in beautiful Mountain View, Arkansas. Had a music festival this weekend, and just enjoying all that is nature and created by God. Very beautiful up here, up in the mountains. Had a good church service this morning, and wanted to record this video. I actually recorded a month or so ago, and the audio was down so low that uh, I had decided to re-record it, and I also got a little wordy. It was like a couple of, had to break it in two parts. It was a couple of like 20, 25-minute videos, and really was trying to make it a little shorter and more concise. So I just wanted to start out today by saying I hope God has been blessing you guys like He does me all the time, and I hope you're having a good day, and I hope this video turns out good, and more importantly, I hope the message gets through. And this message is really more for people that are already born again Christians. It's a call to service, if you will. So you might be asking yourselves, you know, I sin all the time. I'm a Christian, but I do my best not to sin. But I've still got this sin in my life. Insert your sin here, and you're like, I really don't feel like I could be a good witness for God till I overcome that sin. Well, um, there was only ever one perfect human being, and that was Jesus Christ Himself. It was without sin. All of the greats from the Old Testament and the New Testament, every one of them except Jesus, they sinned, and God's able to take imperfect people and use them, and a lot of times He has to uh, get you out of yourself um, and basically have you get to a point of failure before you can really be used. So we have to get rid of that sin of pride that it's all about me, or look what I'm doing, or oh, look what all the good things I'm doing for God. You have to get past that. You have to make yourself available to be used by God. God will use you. You just got to be open to Him speaking to you. You got to pray about it. You know, have your eyes open for opportunities. They come at unexpected, very inopportune times. You may just like this trip I'm on now. I came up here to see the music festival. God may lead you to an encounter with a particular person, and it's generally going to be off the cuff. It's going to be unplanned, but God will use you. And sometimes He calls you for a specific person, some purpose. Sometimes it's just everyday things that you got to be open to. So, having said all that, I want to give you four examples, and there are many, many more. Uh, but I want to give you four really good examples of tremendous people in the Old Testament that God used mightily. And I want to show you, and I'm sure you may know a lot of this already, being Christians, but I want to show you point out the good things that God used them to do, but I also want to show you their shortcomings that are pointed out. And they had sin. In a lot of cases, they had big sin in their life. So, four examples I want to show you today, and I'm going to refer to my notes here. So, everything that I'm going to tell you, I'll give you the scripture to back it up. I want you to go look it up. Please do double check me. I make mistakes. I'm human. So, but I want to give the four examples I want to give you in the Old Testament are Moses, Samson, David, and Jonah. And there's many more examples, but we're going to go through these four guys, and I'm going to try to do this a lot quicker than the previous video that I'm having to redo. So we'll start with Moses. Everybody knows Moses. He was a great soldier for God. He did God many things. God used him to deliver the Israelites out of Egypt. He used Moses to show the Pharaoh the miracles, to show that God was the one true God, to try to soften Pharaoh's heart so that he would let the Israelites go. You guys, I'm sure you know the story, but so where God used Moses to deliver the Israelites out of Egypt, you can find that in Exodus chapters 1 through 12. And also talks about, where God talked to Moses with using the burning bush, where he delivered people from Egypt. Exodus 1 through 12. So that's one of the, or actually a lot of the great things that God used Moses for right there. Exodus 14, I'm sure you've all heard of, Israelites crossing the Red Sea on dry land, went right across the Red Sea. God parted the waters through his power, and he used Moses to lead the people through that. Exodus 14. Another good thing God used Moses to do. Exodus 17. Uh, God used a rod that he provided to Moses to use as like an instrument of God's power, if you will. This rod of God, he gave him that, and they had a war with Amalek. And if you read Exodus 17, you can see that. But what God basically told Moses is, you hold your hands up. Have that rod. Hold your arms up. As long as you can hold your arms up, Israel will prevail in the war with Amalek. And if you start getting tired and you start letting your arms down, I'm not going to be with you so much. You're going to start losing. So it's on you, Moses. Keep your arms up. Keep your faith. Trust in me that as long as you keep your arms up, Israel will prevail. So he ended up having to get, I think, Aaron and another one of his men to kind of help hold his arms up. But ultimately, Israel did prevail in that battle with Amalek. And also in Exodus 20, I'm sure everybody's heard of the Ten Commandments. So God provided the Ten Commandments through Moses. Another way that God used Moses mightily in spite of his weaknesses. Okay, so those are some of the good high points. You could talk for hours or even days about all the things that God used Moses for. Just trying to hit some high points. So the bad, where you're like, well, Moses was a good guy. What did he do that was bad? Again, we're all sinners. God uses imperfect people. So I don't know if you know this or not, but Moses was actually a murderer. So in Exodus chapter 2, verses 11 through 15, it talks about where Moses murdered an Egyptian. So if you guys are familiar with the story, when Moses was born, it was during the time where the Pharaoh was searching out the Israelite male children, having them all killed because he was, afraid that, there was, going to be someone to rise up from Israel to take over. Basically, he thought was going to take over his physical throne. Well, we know that was not the case, to take over his physical throne at this time on earth. But anyway, Pharaoh was afraid of that, so he was trying to kill all the male-born children. So basically, Moses' mother put him, made a little boat out of the bulrushes and kind of prayed that God would protect him, sent him on his way, and basically Moses was raised up by the Pharaoh's daughter. And so he had all the luxuries of being like a prince of in Egypt. So he had a lot of power that went with that. So anyway, when he murdered this Egyptian, it was because this Egyptian was, basically torturing one of the Israelite men, and Moses came upon it, saw it, and it angered him to the point where he basically was, beating the guy up, the Egyptian that was attacking the Israelite man, and he basically beat him so to the point of death. So the guy died. I don't know that he was intentionally trying to murder the guy, but the guy did end up dying. And you might say, well, that was justified. And I'm not getting into all that, but basically he did kill the man. He did kill the Egyptian. So that's bad. That's against the Ten Commandments. That's bad no matter how you look at it. He killed somebody. Next we'll look at the bad thing. Another bad thing Moses did in Exodus chapter 4, verses 10 and 11. Whenever God was calling Moses to go to Egypt to free help free the Israelite people with God of course leading that, Moses made excuses, just like every one of us tries to make excuses why we can't do something. We make excuses to ourselves. We make excuses to God. God calls us to do something. We try to make excuse why we can't do it. So Moses did the same thing. He said, I'm not a good speaker. I stumble on my words. I can't talk. You're not going to be able to use me, God. And God said, oh, hang on. You got Aaron here. I'm going to make him be your right-hand man. He's going to do the speaking for you. He can speak pretty well. So Moses, we'll knock that excuse right out of the way. We got your way. We'll send Aaron with you. Anyway, just showing that Moses was no different. He was kind of afraid of the task. He didn't think he was up to it, so he started trying to make excuses. Next, we're going to see in Numbers chapter 20, verses 1 through 11, Moses disobeyed God. So that's the point where, the Israelites are, they're needing water. I think they're out in the desert at the time. They're needing water, and I think this is actually the second time this type of thing has happened. The first time, God did tell Moses, I think to strike the rock and water would come out. Well, this time, God told Moses to speak to the rock. Well, Moses was already kind of upset at the Israelite people because, they were kind of acting up, being grumbly, disobedient to God, and Moses was getting kind of fed up with it, so he was kind of having a bad day anyway. So, and then, God had done all these things through Moses, as Moses being the instrument of God. And I don't know, but I think maybe, after God worked through you doing all those things, your human pride might step in, and you might start getting the big head a little bit, thinking, oh, look what all the things I did, that God used me to do. Well, Moses was kind of doing that a little bit, and so when God told him to speak to the rock and water would come forth, well, Moses took it on himself to smite that rock. And water, God did still permit water to come out of it to give water to the people of Israel, but God's like He punishes Noah for that. We see that in Numbers chapter 20, verses 12. God's like, look, you disobeyed me, you blatantly went against what I said, and you're a little full of yourself. So I've still showed you a lot of blessings. I'm still going to deliver Israel into the promised land, but you're not going to get to go. You're not going to get to see it. People are going to end up wandering in the wilderness. I think it was 40 years, if I remember right. But he's like, there's a punishment. Punishment on this earth, at least, it's not just for people that don't believe in God. God punishes His children when they disobey Him. So that's Moses. So from Moses, we'll move on. Pardon me while I flip my notes here. From Moses, we're going to move on to Samson. So as you guys know, Samson was the strongest man ever listed in the Bible. I don't know if you guys watch strongman competition, weightlifting, or whatever. I'm kind of into all those things. Physical fitness. You can't really tell it at my age. I'm kind of put on a little weight, but I've always kind of liked weightlifting. So Samson kind of spoke to me. Being a strong man in the Bible. So believe it or not, everybody thinks of Samson and his great strength. I don't know what Samson looked like physically, if he was a big bodybuilder looking guy with muscles everywhere, or if he just was imbued with the power of God. The Spirit of God came on him when Samson prayed for. I don't know how the details of that worked out, but I can tell you that Samson, before the Israelites, pleaded to God to, give them a king. They wanted a king. Before that time, God had judges over Israel, and those judges kind of, I don't know if you call it rule, but they judged Israel, good and bad things. They kind of led the people, but they weren't a king. So Samson was the last judge that was listed in the Old Testament before they got a king. So Samson was a little bit of a womanizer. Again, I don't know if he was this good-looking guy with big muscles. I don't know all that, but apparently he had an eye for the ladies. And but anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. We're going to talk about the good things that Samson did first. Number one, reference Judges chapter 13. All this about Samson's going to come from the book of Judges. We'll start with Judges 13. Samson was born of a Nazarene, and he was going to be a deliverer of Israel from the Philistines, which is, kind of like when they were under Egypt's rule at a time. Well, now they're under Philistine rules. Like every time Israel, starts falling away from God, not following God, well, He kind of punishes them in that now they find themselves under dominion of another nation again. So here they are again. Excuse me. They're kind of under the dominion of the Philistines. So the Philistines are kind of their enemy, even though they're sort of ruled over by them at this time. So Samson was going to be a deliverer. Again, he was the last judge, and he was born a Nazarene. Well, we know, like when Jesus was born, one of the things the Nazarenes did is the men didn't cut their hair. So, Samson being a Nazarene, I forget all the exact things, but I know they didn't cut their hair. They were not supposed to come in contact with the dead bodies, and they weren't supposed to drink. Drink liquor, wine, whatever. They weren't supposed to drink alcohol. And that was three of the things for being a Nazarene. So, anyway, Judges 13, we see this promise of him being a deliverer from the Philistines and talking about his birth. Then we jump to Judges 15, verses 20, and Judges 16, verses 31. Again, it talks about him being the last judge of Israel. He was a judge for 20-something years. And then Judges chapter 16 talks about, again, about him being a champion against the Philistines. So those are the things that he accomplished, God accomplished through Samson, if you will. So what are some of the bad things about Samson? So, again, I'd mentioned earlier, Samson had kind of an eye for the ladies. That was part of his downfall. That, and he was, kind of arrogant a bit. But anyway, Judges 14, we see where he takes a wife from the Philistine people, who again are Israel's enemy. I mean, so anytime you start, marrying from a group of people that's your homeland's enemy, that's probably not going to end very well for you or your people. So, Samson had an eye for this Philistine woman, or actually, I don't know if it actually said she was Philistine, but she was of the lands, around Philistine that were governed by Philistine. So he married her. So, and this is not Delilah. A lot of people get confused that this is Delilah. This isn't a time of Delilah yet. So this was just, he married a Philistine woman, and it talks about the other chapters between probably 14 and 16 talks about they went to this wedding feast. There was this riddle that got posed about the I believe it was a lion's carcass that actually Samson had slew with the power of God. And anyway, honey got in there, and there was a riddle involved in that, and the Philistines couldn't figure it out. Well, they went to Samson's wife, who was Philistine, basically kind of threatened her if she didn't find out what the answer was and give it to him, because it was kind of a bet about some kind of so many garments, which, you know, even in today's time, you go out and buy ever how many it was, 80 or 100 or whatever, exchanges of clothing for a man. That's not cheap. So, you know, the bet was something to that if they could, you know, if they could figure out the riddle, Samson would have to give them that. If they couldn't figure it out, they'd have to do the same for him. So the Philistines basically went and threatened his wife and said, "You better give us an answer," which she did. And then later, I think his father said something about that woman had went off to go to another man. Anyway, that for whatever that marriage did not work out. So then later we see in Judges 16 where you know, after this marriage didn't work out, that Samson basically you know, he was fornicating with another woman that they listed in there. You know, I don't think they called her by name, but basically, you know, he was having sex outside of marriage. And then later on, he got tied up with Delilah, and same kind of thing happened. You'd think after, you know, what was he saying? Burn me once, shame on you. Burn me twice, shame on me. Well, this had already kind of happened with his first wife with the Philistines. They had kind of, you know, got to Samson through his wife. So now they're coming through Delilah, wanting to get the secret to Samson's strength. And she'd already tried to trick him two times before. And, you know, she turned around and whatever it was he told her his strength was, well, she tried to do that to, you know, basically be his undoing. And you would think that he would have saw through that. But I guess, you know, our humanness, our, you know, lustfulness, sometimes that blinds us to the truth, what's going on. So finally she came to him, I think it was the third time, and he told her that the secret of his strength was not necessarily his hair, but he told her if, you know, if his hair was cut, he would lose his strength. What he was really losing was that was one of his oaths as a Nazarene, not to cut his hair. Well, he had already, you know, drank strong wine, alcohol, whatever, you know, at some of these, you know, whether it was a wedding feast or whatever. Anyway, he had gotten into, you know, drinking. He'd done some drinking, so he broke that one. I think whenever he slew ever how many men it was with I think the jawbone of a donkey, you know, he was, you know, among the dead. So anyway, this is like, I don't know if you'd say it was a third thing that he had defiled of being a Nazarene, but it basically, you know, there's nothing magical about his hair. It was his oath and dedication to God that he was defiling, and that's why God, you know, basically robbed him of his strength, or he didn't rob him, God doesn't rob him, he took it back from him, I should say, because the strength came from God to start with. So the lesson there is, you know, lust is a terrible sin, and it tempts us all. So we see it was kind of Samson's downfall. Now he turned it around at the end. He repented to God for doing all this, and it was still a little bit out of vengeance. But you know, he prayed to God when they were making a spectacle out of Samson. You know, he's blind. They, you know, blinded him after, you know, they cut his hair and robbed. You know, he didn't have a strength anymore, and he thought he was just going to go, you know, handle up on all these Philistines like he always did, like they were nothing, and he didn't have a strength. So they blinded him. Now they're making a spectacle out of him in this arena, you know, kind of mocking him. And so we got up on these two big stone columns, I guess, that were supported this arena. And, you know, he prayed to God to give him back his strength this one last time and let him just perish with the Philistines, but to use him this one last time. So in Samson's death, he actually slew more of the Philistines, which were Israel's enemy, than he ever did in his life. So again, sometimes God will use you in spite of yourself. So moving on from Samson, we'll go and we'll look at David. So uh, David um, was the second king of Israel. I believe Saul was first king. So David was the second king of Israel, and so some of the good things about David, he wrote the majority of the Psalms, or songs, if you will, the songbook of the Bible, Book of Psalms, and he wrote the majority of those chapters in Psalm. So 1 Samuel 17, David, oh man, he was such a man of faith, and actually, and I don't have the verse right in front of me, but somewhere in the Bible it actually talks about um, David being a man after God's own heart, and that's a pretty big compliment. So, anyways, 1 Samuel 17, David was a man of faith, and talks about where David, as a young youth, faced Goliath. You guys probably know the story. I won't elaborate on it, but you can look at 1 Samuel 17. But basically, he was just like a young teenager, and he's got an old timey slingshot basically, and he goes in and faces this giant of a man, literally a giant, like 8, 9 foot tall. I forget exactly how tall he was, but he was a giant of a man, and everybody, all the other warriors of Israel, they were terrified of the guy. They didn't want to face him. So here comes this little skinny, um, teenager now. Granted, through God's protection and power, David had killed like lions and bears. I forget what all he killed when they were trying to attack the sheep that David was in charge of taking care of. So God had already delivered him from like these wild animals, and David's not afraid. He's like, God's got me. God's gonna use me to defeat this big bully of a Goliath that's mocking our God. We're not gonna put up with this. What are you guys waiting for? So anyway, um, God used David to deliver them from Goliath, and basically they were going to have this champion versus champion. Whoever was the winner was going to be declared the winner of the battle, and so Israel won. So then we see another good thing was in 1 Samuel chapter 24, where the first of two times that David spares Saul's life. So Saul gets a little jealous of David and all the good things that God's doing through David, and the people are really loving David, and so Saul gets a little jealous, and he's afraid well, David's going to try to take over my throne or whatever. So he was kind of after David to get rid of him. So Saul's got his army, got his people after David, trying to track him down and kill him, and so David. They're I think at the time they're like into this like big cavern or cave or whatever, and Saul's guys are like sleeping, and so David goes up in there, and he's like, he doesn't even want to touch Saul, because he's like, Saul's the anointed king of God. I'm not going to come up against God's man. But basically, to show Saul that he could have killed him if he wanted to, he cuts off a little sliver of his garment, and it comes up later. He's showing Saul, look, I could have killed you right there, but you're God's man. I'm not going to go against you. But why are you coming after me? What have I done that warrants you trying to kill me? And so they kind of make a little amends there for a while. But later, again, 1 Samuel 26, again, here comes Saul after David again. Well, this time Saul's asleep out in the battlefield, out in the field or whatever, where they're trying to hunt down David again, and David comes upon Saul and the army and everything, and they're asleep. So I think David takes, I forget what I think he takes like Saul's sword and like his water jug or something like that. He takes from him. I forget exactly what it is, but basically to show, he takes that just as like a memento to show Saul, look, I could have killed you again, and I didn't do it, but please stop coming after me. I'm not trying to, take over anything, especially not without your blessing or whatever. So, and then, anyway, the next good thing we see is 2 Samuel chapter 5, verses 3 through 7, where David does ultimately become the second king of Israel. So, um, God's using David, um, you know, and basically at this point he's the second king of Israel. Now the bad things David did. So, Second Samuel, uh, Second Samuel chapter 11, we see what are the big sins David did, and I'm not saying by any means these are the only sins any of these guys did. I'm sure just like all of us, they sinned a lot in their life. So anyway, the first bad thing we're going to look at that David did is Second Samuel chapter 11. He committed adultery and murder. He had this eye for this beautiful woman named Bathsheba, and her husband was one of the men in David's army in Israel's army, and so basically, David was messing around with Bathsheba, outside. She's married. She's a married woman, and so he basically commits adultery. Um, you know, I don't know if he used his power as king, whatever, but he committed adultery with this married woman, and then later, uh, she has a baby um, with David, and she's still married to this guy. Well, um, basically, David talks to one of his commanders and says, "Look, here's what I want y'all to do. I want y'all to put this guy up in like the front lines of the battle, and when the enemy comes on him, y'all just kind of leave him there by himself, so so he'll most likely get killed with nobody else fighting there beside him. The enemy will come on and they'll get him, and so basically, maybe not by his own hand, but by his own order, David committed murder by having that guy killed. So and then later, I think he takes the woman to be his wife, and so what's God's punishment? God's gonna have a punishment. You do wrong, whether if you're a sinner and uh, if you don't get your punishment here on earth, we're all going to be judged before God, and of course those that don't accept Jesus Christ and repent of their sins are gonna end up going to hell. But here on earth, you're a Christian, God's gonna punish you. So what's God's punishment for David? So 2 Samuel chapter 12 verses 7 through 14, we see that God punishes David. He basically this child that he had through adultery. God basically says, that baby's going to die, and then your your lineage is not going to do so well later on. And anyway, if you read 2 Samuel verses chapter 12, 7 through 14, you'll kind of get the details at the moment. I'm not remembering exactly all that went, but I do remember that God basically said your descendants are, they're gonna have trouble after this because you did this. Um, so then next we're gonna look at, if I get my notes to cooperate here. Next we're gonna look at, last guy we're gonna look at is Jonah. This one's gonna be pretty short, but you guys probably know the tale of, or I shouldn't say the tale, the story of Jonah, and a lot of people say Jonah and the whale. The Bible doesn't say it was a whale; it just says it was a great fish. We don't know what kind of fish it was. I don't know that it really matters. Call it a whale if you want to, but it was a great fish. So we're going to start kind of the reverse this time, just showing the good. First, we're going to show the bad. So what's the bad with Jonah? Well, Jonah, if I remember, I think it's only like 4 books. It's not very long, so you can read the whole chapter. It's all basically the story of Jonah. But the bad happened in Jonah chapter 1, where God told Jonah, look, the people in Nineveh, they're evil. They've turned away from me. They're not following my commandments. They're just everything they do is evil. It's kind of like the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. if you want to even say it, maybe the people of the United States these days. Maybe a lot of lands in the world today. The world is becoming more and more a wicked place. And I'd definitely say the United States as a whole. Me included in that. Um, the people of the United States need to turn back to God and repent of their wicked ways and seek God's face. And God promises then He'll heal our land. If we don't do that, you kind of see what happened to Israel when they don't follow God. So there is punishment for not following God. Anyway, in Jonah chapter 1, God tells Jonah, look, I want you to go to Nineveh. I want you to preach to these people and tell them, look, I'm going to destroy their whole land, their nation. I'm going to destroy Nineveh. It's going to be gone unless they repent and turn back to me. And if they repent, then I'll spare them. I won't destroy them. So Jonah's like, I don't know, Nineveh. That's I'm from Israel, and we don't really agree with a lot of what Nineveh does, and uh, so I don't really want them to. Jonah is his human side. He's like, I don't really know that I want them to, be saved out of all this. But anyway, so he runs from God. He don't want to go do it. Whatever reason, he don't want to do what God's telling him to do. And so he runs. He gets on a ship that's going the opposite direction from Nineveh. He gets on that ship. Well, what happens? Well, God punished him. We see, again in chapter 1 of Jonah, he gets on the ship. Well, God brings a storm up, and the whole ship's about to get capsized. And so all the people on the ship like, what's going on? And I'm sure there was all kind of different people, different religions on the ship, and they're like, who sinned against what God, and who's done something wrong, and something's going on here, and somebody needs to fess up and tell us what's going on, and so we can get out of this deal and not all die. And so Jonah says, look, it's probably me. Y'all probably just ought to go ahead and throw me overboard because I didn't do what God told me, and I think He's punishing y'all. And of course, the one true God, the only living God He's talking about. And so they're like, well, we don't really want your blood on our hands. And but anyway, ultimately they did kind of toss him overboard. Well, we know what happens after that. The seas calmed, the people on that ship were saved, but Jonah spent 3 days and 3 nights in that belly of the great fish. And basically, while Jonah's in the belly of that great fish, he gets to thinking about his life, and he realizes he sinned against God, and he repents. He truly repents of it, and so God tells him again, "You gonna listen to me this time? You gonna go to Nineveh like I'm asking you?" And Jonah says, "Yes, Lord, I will. I'll do what you ask me this time." So we see in Jonah 2 where Jonah basically repents. And so basically I think the great fish basically like you know regurgitates and pukes him, whatever you want to call it, up on the banks of, I think they're near Nineveh. And so then Jonah goes and does what God told him to do, which basically preaches to the people in Nineveh they better turn from their wicked ways and seek God's face and follow His commandments and truly be repentant, and then He'll spare their land. Well, they took it to heart, and they did do that, and they repented of their ways, and they turned back toward God, and God spared them, at least for the time being. So there you have it. You got 4 good examples of just regular guys. There was nothing special about them. They had different circumstances. They weren't all open to following God. Some of them sinned before God used them. Some of them, big sin. Obviously we all sin all the time, but we try not to if you're a Christian. But some of these did big sins before it started. Some of them, outright said, I don't want to do that before it even started. Some of them sinned, halfway through, like David. Everybody's different, but God can use every single man, woman, boy, and girl. If you're a born again Christian, quit using excuses that I'm not good enough, or I hadn't been a Christian long enough, I'm not deep enough in the faith, I don't have the whole Bible memorized. God can use you. If God's calling you to do something, listen to Him, and I'm talking to myself too. Listen to what God has in store for you. Pray about it. Pray about it, and God will show you. But you need to do what He's wanting you to do. Now, as a born again Christian, every single one of us, if you look at, um, uh, the Great Commission in Matthew, God tells us, go ye therefore into all the world and preach the gospel. We're supposed to share the good news of Jesus Christ and salvation to the rest of the world. We're not supposed to keep it to ourselves and be greedy with our salvation, and just go, well, I'm saved and that's all, that's good enough, I'm gonna make it into heaven. No, you need to worry about not just your family but all your friends, and worry about your enemies too, because bottom line is we shouldn't have enemies. We're all supposed to love each other as our brothers and sisters if we're following God's commandments. And He said the greatest two commandments is have no other gods before Jehovah God, the Trinity God, the Father, God, Son, the Holy God, and the Holy Ghost. Have no other gods before them, and then love your neighbor as yourself. And if you do those two things, all the rest, everything else will fall in line. So anyway, I hope this has been useful. As Christians, you guys, please get out there and spread the good news. We don't want anybody to go to hell. I know I certainly don't. But I hope you guys have a great Sunday. I hope you had a good worship service in church this morning, and you guys enjoy this beautiful fall weather. And again, I'm here at a private RV park here, and they've let me use this little kind of rustic looking kind of old outdoor stove area to do my little video. But anyway, I hope you guys have a great Sunday. May God bless you. And just remember that Jesus Christ loves each and every one of you, and so do I. Until next time, you guys have a great day. And I don't usually say this, but I guess it's the thing to say on YouTube. Um, if you would like my video and subscribe to the channel, maybe more people get to see these devotions and the music that I try to do, which is all to the glory of God. So again, please hit that like and subscribe, and I hope you guys have a great day. God bless you. Love you guys.